Mr. Averill, there's three of us here tonight. Myself, I'm the vice chair of the Holden AgCom. Wendy Somerset is here. She's our chairman, and Chris
Hi,
Hugo,
Wendy.
vice chair.
Chris,
Go ahead with your presentation.
just by way of introduction, my name is Al Averill, which you already know. Uh, I am retired from the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. In my semi-retirement, I guess, I've been enlisted to help facilitate the recognition of additional farmlands that are suited for crop production, but are not recognized in the USDA's soil survey mapping. Now, this is really a workaround for limitations of the soil survey. And I can speak to that with great authority because I was one of the people who was involved with producing the soil mapping. That was my job for 22 field seasons, was mapping and classifying soils. I was one of the people who drew the squiggly lines on the aerial photographs that you might be familiar with that delineate the different soil types. So it just, from a personal note, I'm kind of familiar with that part of the world in that my grandparents were Lithuanian immigrants who lived in Worcester. And my family and I, we lived in Shrewsbury until I was about 13 years old before we relocated. But yeah, and we had a field office in Holden as well. So I've spent a bit of time there over the years. So I'm here to talk about what's known as what's called farmland of local importance. And what that is simply, and I don't know how much of the information that I had sent Jim previously got distributed, but it's a list of soil types from the soil survey that have evidence of suitability for crop production, but they're not classified as important farmland soils in the soil survey. And you see, I've got these different things highlighted, and you folks may or may not know what a soil survey is, or what the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service is. So I'm just highlighting those things in this PowerPoint slide, more to remind me of what to explain than anything else. That's what a PowerPoint is, after all. It's just cheat notes for the presenter. So why are we doing this? It's because the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is a small agency within the USDA that helps to implement conservation practices on land, also has a program called the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. And I'm going to apologize right up front for all the syllables and the acronyms, but these are government programs and they tend to have very long names. But the bottom line is that under the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, there's this thing called ALE, the Agricultural Land Easement Program. And under that program, a farm landowner is paid the market value of the land less the agricultural value in exchange for limiting non-ag uses. Essentially, if a farm landowner is interested and the land qualifies, then NRCS will provide matching funds to purchase an easement, a conservation easement, farmland conservation easement. The landowner is paid the market value or the development value of the land to do with whatever he or she wants to do with it, in exchange for an easement on the land, which ensures that its agricultural capacity is not compromised into perpetuity. So that's the reason behind the work that I'm doing, is because of this program. I wanted to point out that this is a partnership program. I mentioned that NRCS provides matching funds, provides 50% of the value of the land. A partner provides the other 50%. And typically that's been the Massachusetts Department of Ag Resources with its APR program. You may be familiar, you folks may have heard of that. The Agricultural Preservation Restriction Program. There's probably APR land in Holden. I'm told there are about 1,000 parcels that are protected under APR, and about a third of those were funded by NRCS funding. So that's kind of the background about the program. And I suppose if nothing else happens, as a result of our meeting tonight, at least you have a greater awareness of what that program is. So in order to be eligible for the program, a parcel of land has to have a certain amount of important farmland soils. And the reference for that is the USDA's soil survey. This is a product that is available publicly. And if you Google web soil survey, you can put in the address of your land and you can get soils information. So the soil survey, and you may recognize in this picture, this image, the outline of the town of Holden. So I went into web soil survey and I outlined the town boundaries, more or less, to show you this image. And all of these delineations are the various soil types that are mapped throughout the town of Holden. Now, the soil survey is comprised of soil maps. It has all kinds of information about different soil properties, chemistry, texture. It goes on forever. And there are interpretations for land use associated with the soil survey. So the idea behind the soil survey is to provide the public with information about the soil resource so that hopefully better land use decisions are made using that information. These interpretations talk about what the soils are good for, what they're limited for, etc. But one of the classifications or one of the interpretations is farmland class. And this depicts the town of Holden and its color-coded farmland class, where the green shows soil survey map units that meet criteria for prime farmland. The blue is farmland of statewide importance. You see a lot of red here. That's all lumped into not prime farmland. But there's this other category referred to as farmland of local importance. And that's why I'm talking to you folks this evening. So what is farmland of local importance? Well, the Code of Federal Regulations describes prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance, unique farmlands, etc. And this is what it has to say about farmland of local importance. It simply states that there, in addition to prime farmland soils and farmland of statewide importance soils, there's additional lands that are important for crop production. So even though the soil survey shows these prime farmland soils and farmland of statewide importance, etc., it doesn't catch all of the land that is suited for crop production. But here's the kicker. In order to recognize this, a local agency or agencies have to actually acknowledge farmland of local importance. And that can be your local ag commission, your cons commission, your planning board, any local entity that represents the town's values with regard to agriculture or open space or conservation or even small business, because farming, after all, is a small business. Any entity that represents the town's values can sign off on the recognition of farmland of local importance. So why is this being done? In a nutshell, it helps to overcome the limitations of the soil survey information. It helps to catch those areas that the soil survey misses. And therefore, it ensures that all the lands that are important for crop production can be recognized if a willing farm landowner wants to pursue an easement using USDA funding. Because in order to be eligible for it, the parcel must have at least 50% important farmland soil. It doesn't matter if it's prime farmland soils or farmland of statewide importance or farmland of local importance. It all counts the same towards the 50%. So the bottom line is, if more important farmland soils are recognized, then there's a greater potential for farmland preservation program eligibility. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. This picture on the left part of the screen here shows an area in Holden and the soil mapping. You see these symbols here. This 305D is not an important farmland soil. You see it corresponds with this red in the farmland class map adjacent to it. Yet you can see that this soil is suited for hay production. And there's evidence that this has been used for hay production. So that is, in a nutshell, is the way we identify farmland of farmland of local importance. I review the soil survey mapping in the town, and I look at aerial imagery where I find evidence of crop production on land that's not mapped as important farmland soils. Those are listed as farmland of local importance. It's as simple as that. So I'll just, without getting into the technicalities, this particular map unit, that's a Paxton fine sandy loam, 15 to 25% slope. So tends to be too steep to meet criteria for prime farmland due to erodibilities in farmland of statewide importance. Yet it's well suited for hay production. So this is a way to capture those as important for agriculture. Here's the same shot, and this is just from Google Earth Pro, just showing the evidence that this field is actually in hay production.
Yes, it is. I do it.
It's your land. No kidding. How about? Well, it's been confirmed and verified. So here's another parcel, and this is just an example of where the recognition of farmland of local importance can do some good. If the farmland owner so wants it. So this area on the right-hand side, this shows the soil mapping. These map units, 312B, 307D, 307C, 307B, and 305D do not meet criteria for important farmland soils for prime farmland or from farmlands of statewide importance. But this land was cleared. These soil survey map units are actually described as extremely stony. This land was cleared and the surface stones were removed, and now the land is suited for crop production. So all of these areas that are suited for crop production can be recognized as farmland of local importance. And in this particular example, if farmland of local importance were to be acknowledged, then the extent of important farmland soils on this parcel would increase from about 27 to 72%, thus enabling eligibility for farmland for the federally funded farmland preservation. So how does this happen? I kind of already described what I do to make this happen, but there's a premise that the town cares about open space, agriculture, etc. And I did find something in the open space and recreation plan for Holden that was dated in 2022, where open space and agriculture were specifically listed as preservation goals in that plan. So
it's also in the town's master plan for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I mean it's documented that this is a value of the town, which helps legitimize anyone who wants to, any entity such as the AgCom that wants to acknowledge farmland of local importance. So again, I review the land use and the soil mapping. I just go to the soil survey information. And again, sometime when you don't have anything to do, Google web soil survey and play around with it. You can maybe learn something about the soils in your area of interest. And then I compile evidence of suitability for crop production, looking at aerial imagery. I look at the land use, and sometimes local knowledge helps. Case in point, just this evening, Jim, with your verification that the land is hayed. And then I list those soil survey map units that qualify as farmland of local importance, and I put them in this document. And there's a preamble that pretty much mimics the same verbiage that's in the Code of Federal Regulations. There's a caveat that talks about wetland conservation provisions of the Food Security Act and highly erodible land provisions. And there's also a disclaimer that states that the recognition of important farmland soil has no effect on land use, or it doesn't designate, it has no regulatory implications with regard to land use. As a matter of fact, it has no regulatory implications at all. So you'll see that there's 3 columns. There's the map unit symbol, the map unit name, and qualifiers. These qualifiers separate out the areas of mapping that are suited for crop production from those that are not. So it separates out the ones that are non-stony from the ones that are extremely stony, etc. So we want to ensure that by just naming the map unit, we're not saying that anywhere this is mapped in the town, it's important for crop production. These qualifying conditions have to be met. And then it's usually 2 pages, and once in a while there's 3. And then there's a signatory section, and it's signed by 2 people. One is the local entity. In this case, this is for town of Rutland, and the chair of the Ag Commission signed off on this. And the other signatory is the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service state conservationist for Massachusetts, a gentleman named Dan Wright. The USDA's NRCS is the lead agency for all things soils, and NRCS has to sign off on this, and in order to be able to apply it to its programs. So yeah, where is it stored? That list is stored in this thing online called the Field Office Technical Guide. It's available to the public, and it's stored there. And again, it will be referenced if and when a Holden farm landowner is interested in this program. So if the town wants to help the USDA NRCS help farm landowners, occasionally, if this is something you want to do, occasionally I may need help with verifying the cropping or land use history. It's very rare that I need to do that, but once in a great while, I can't tell if the land is hayed or if it's simply mowed in order to maintain a viewscape or just to keep it open. But the big thing is that someone has to sign off on the recognition of farmland of local importance. Again, to reiterate, in order for the USDA to recognize this and use it, it has to follow the Code of Federal Regulations, which states that a local entity recognizes farmland of local importance. And that's why I'm talking to folks like you. So this can be you folks, it can be your CONSCOM chair, your select board chair, planning board chair, etc. It doesn't matter that much as to who does it, as long as that entity represents the town's values with regard to agriculture, open space, conservation, etc. Yeah, this is what I'm asking you to consider doing, to acknowledge the soils that are suited for crop production that are not currently reflected as important farmland soils in the soil survey by signing off on the list that I will produce, if you want me to. This map shows the towns in Massachusetts that have recognized farmland of local importance to date. It shows 112. There's actually 113. The map hasn't been updated since the town of Wendell recognized farmland of local importance. You can see predominantly there's a lot of work that we've done in the western part of the state. That's where there's a lot of farmland still. And I've been moving east since then. There's a lot of farms in Worcester County, as you folks may know. I think there's more farms in Worcester County than in any other county in the state of Massachusetts. So I guess that's about it. I hope you'll consider supporting this with the thought that maybe it'll help a farm landowner. I will say that to put it in context, there's probably about a couple of hundred acres, maybe 200 acres throughout the town of Holden that will qualify as farmland of local importance. And probably some of that is already protected. So it won't be a huge panacea with regard to farmland preservation, but it might make a difference for a farmland owner if this is done, and it doesn't do any harm. So that's it in a nutshell. I hope I didn't get too long-winded. Be happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Is it possible to get a copy of this?
Sure.
Oh, you're recording it. Thank you.
Yeah, the thing about the recording is you're not seeing the pretty pictures.
No. Okay.
There is a webinar.
No, we can see them.
There is a webinar. Is that accurate? Still on the USDA? And
I'm not sure what webinar you might be talking about. There's a lot of them.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's one on farmland of local importance.
It says it's a webinar. It says Farmland Protection Policy Act, FPPA overview. Looks like it's October 2020.
PPA, that is the farmland preservation. That's a different program,
Okay.
FPPA.
Just heads up, I got a note here as the host that our meeting is going to run out in probably 7 minutes or something. So if we lose you, it's not.
A 40-minute Zoom.
Okay, that's fine.
So
well, if there are any quick questions, whatever you folks decide, just let me know.
So you said in passing, there's no downsides. Could you be more specific and more complete there? Is there in fact no downside to us doing this?
Well, I guess I have a follow-up question to that. So say I own a farm in Holden and we get this process, you haven't identified on my farm any farmland of local importance, but I disagree and I want you to come out to my farm. So is that how it would move forward or no? Because you've already gone through this process and said no.
If I understand the question, we only have a few minutes here. If you were interested, so you're saying you may have been interested and you were told that your land did not qualify?
Well, I haven't looked into the easement program, but I'm saying if we sign off on this and you identify in land in Holden, right, and then you don't identify other lands that a landowner might disagree with and think that they do qualify, and say they've turned it into productive, farmland, fields that have turned into pasture that then have turned into a potential hayfield, let's say.
Yes.
And that's a possibility, right?
Yes, as a matter of fact, in the example I showed, land was cleared and the stones were removed since
Right.
the original survey.
So if we sign off on this, this year, 24, and say somebody, decides they want to do it next year or 2 years from now, and the land use has changed, are they excluded from?
No, not necessarily. There's a couple of scenarios. The farmland of local importance list could be revised, or if the soil type now is listed, and because of improvements to the land, such as surface stone removal, the qualifying conditions are met, then it would qualify as farmland of local importance.
And you verify that by actually going out there at that point?
No.
You do it
It's
all
done. I do this remotely by looking at aerial imagery, historical aerial imagery. I go back to from recent imagery back to 1985.
Okay.
And wherever I see evidence of suitability for crop production, I list the associated soil type as farmland of local importance.
Well,
It usually takes me about 8 hours to do this for a town.
Can we make a motion?
Yeah, or we can.
well,
Or we can discuss after. We can
We'll discuss after.
let Al go.
Yep.
well, I'm saying you can make a motion from the.
Well,
If that's what you would be doing.
Is there anything else we need from Al before he
I
disappears?
don't think so. Any other questions for him? Okay. Thank you
Great.
for your time.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it.
Yeah, Jim. I'll shoot you an email in a few days or something to
Okay.
see if you folks decide anything. Thanks for your time and for your service to your town.
Right. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye now. Be
Thanks.
well.